Most men believe that once they step back, once they stop reaching out, once the conversation ends, the emotional connection dies with it. That's not how human psychology works, and it's definitely not how attraction works. Absence doesn't erase emotional impact, it magnifies it. When you're no longer present, the mind doesn't go quiet, it starts filling in the silence. And what it fills that silence with is memory, imagination, and unresolved emotion. The very space you think is making you irrelevant is often the space where she starts thinking the most. When you were available, predictable, and always there, your presence required no effort on her part. She didn't need to wonder. She didn't need to reflect. She didn't need to feel the contrast between having you and not having you. But the moment you stop trying to manage the outcome, stop checking in, stop asking for clarity, and stop chasing reassurance, something changes internally. Her emotional system no longer has certainty, and uncertainty is where curiosity is born. The human mind hates unfinished emotional loops. When something meaningful disappears without explanation or drama, it doesn't feel resolved, it feels incomplete. This is why trying harder almost always backfires. Every extra message, every attempt to clear things up, every emotional explanation robs her of the chance to feel the loss. You think you're keeping the connection alive, but you're actually smothering the emotional space required for attraction to breathe. Attraction grows in freedom. Pressure kills it when you remove yourself calmly, without resentment or desperation. The emotional contrast becomes unavoidable. She feels the absence not because you're gone, but because the emotional rhythm has been disrupted. And here's what most men don't understand: women don't process emotional connections in a linear, logical way. They process them in waves. There are moments of distraction, moments of clarity, moments of nostalgia. Absence gives those waves room to surface. A song comes on. A place triggers a memory. A quiet moment reminds her of how she felt when she was around you. You didn't need to do anything for that to happen. You just needed to stop interfering with the process by being constantly present. Silence is powerful only when it's clean. Clean silence has no anger in it, no hidden agenda, no internal countdown waiting for her to reach out. It's silence that comes from self respect and forward motion. When you pull back to refocus on your life, your purpose, your growth, you're not disappearing, you're reestablishing your value. Emotional strength is felt even when you're not there. Weakness, on the other hand, is loud even through words on a screen. This is why absence doesn't work for men who are secretly hoping it will force a reaction. That energy leaks through. But when you genuinely stop needing anything from her, when your happiness isn't tied to whether she remembers you or not, the dynamic shifts naturally. She senses that you're no longer emotionally available on demand, and that creates a subtle tension. Not fear, not anxiety, tension. And tension is the foundation of attraction. What surprises most men isn't that she thinks about them, it's when she does. It's rarely during the first few days of silence, it happens later. When the emotional dust settles and the contrast becomes clear, when the certainty of having you fades, the emotional imprint you left behind becomes louder. That's when absence is its real work, quietly and without force. So don't mistake silence for being forgotten. More often than not, it's the beginning of being remembered in a way that finally matters. Most men believe that being remembered is about frequency: how often you texted, how much time you spent together, how available you were, how consistent you showed up. But women don't bond to consistency the way men do. They bond to emotional experience. She may forget the exact words you said, the dates you went on, or how long you talked that night, coach, but she will never forget how you made her feel in those moments. Emotional memory doesn't fade the same way logical memory does. It embeds itself quietly and resurfaces when the conditions are right. This is why men get confused when a woman reconnects after weeks or months of silence. They assume something external triggered it, but most of the time it's internal. An emotion reactivated, a feeling resurfaced. Attraction isn't stored in calendars or message threads, it's stored in sensations: excitement, safety, desire, laughter, challenge. Emotional polarity: if you created those as feelings, they don't disappear just because you stop texting. They sit beneath the surface, waiting for contrast, space, and time to bring them back into focus. When you're constantly available, those feelings become diluted. Familiarity numbs emotional intensity. Over communication replaces anticipation. The more predictable you become, the less her emotional system needs to engage. That's why relationships often feel strongest in the beginning, not because of time, but because of emotional contrast. When you step back, the contrast returns. Suddenly, she's not responding to your messages, she's responding to the absence of a feeling she once had. Women don't miss men, they miss how they felt when they were with them. And feelings are triggered by memory, not effort, coach. You could send a perfectly written message and feel ignored, while a single memory from the past can pull her attention back without you doing anything at all. That's why casing logic never works. You can't argue someone into desire. You can't convince someone to feel something. Feeling either reactivates on its own or it doesn't. This is also why trying to stay on her radar usually backfires. Every unnecessary message shifts you from being a feeling to being noise. Emotional attraction thrives in suggestion, not saturation. When you stop talking, the emotional imprint becomes clearer because it's no longer competing with constant input. Silence removes distraction. What remains is the emotional residue of the connection you built. And here's the part most men overlook: negative emotions fade faster than positive ones. Frustration, irritation, or confusion dissolve with time, but pleasure, excitement, and desire linger. This is basic emotional psychology. The mind naturally filters out discomfort and holds on to experiences that felt good. That's why distance often softens resistance and revives curiosity. She forgets the tension but remembers the warmth. She forgets the argument but remembers how you made her laugh, how you made her feel seen, how effortless things felt when you weren't trying to control the outcome. When you understand this, you stop panicking about being forgotten. You stop measuring connection by response time. You stop equating silence with rejection. Instead, you trust the emotional impact you left behind. If it was real, it doesn't vanish. It simply goes quiet until something reminds her of it. That reminder doesn't come from you forcing contact, it comes from space, from contrast, and from you continuing to live a grounded, purposeful life. Emotional memory works in the background, not on demand. She may forget your words, but she remembers the way you made her feel, and that's the part that eventually brings her back to wondering about you. Most men believe silence is a tactic. They treat it like a button you press to get a reaction. They stop texting, pull back, and then sit there emotionally tense, checking their phone, counting days, hoping the silence will work. That kind of silence has weight to it. It feels anxious, performative, and outcome dependent, and women can feel the difference immediately. Silence only creates attraction when it comes from strength, not fear. When it comes from fear, it communicates insecurity louder than words ever could. Weak silence is rooted in avoidance. It's the man who disappears because he's afraid of rejection, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of losing her. Even though he's quiet on the outside, he's loud on the inside. He's emotionally leaning forward, waiting for validation. That energy doesn't vanish just because no message was sent. It leaks through the dynamic. Women are extremely attuned to emotional subtext. They don't respond to what you do as much as why you're doing it. Strong silence, on the other hand, is calm, it's clean, it's not reactive, it doesn't need to prove anything. It happens when a man decides to refocus on his life instead of managing someone else's emotions. He doesn't disappear to punish, he doesn't pull back to manipulate. He pulls back because he respects himself enough not to chase what isn't choosing him freely. That shift alone changes the entire emotional atmosphere. When silence comes from strength, it creates contrast. There's no emotional explanation attached to it. No dramatic exit, no need to announce boundaries. You simply stop overgiving. And in that absence, something subtle happens. She doesn't feel abandoned, she feels a change in access. The emotional certainty she had begins to loosen. Not in a fearful way, but in a curious one. Curiosity is the doorway to attraction. This is why forced silence fails. If your intention is to make her miss you, you're still emotionally dependent on her response. You're still letting her dictate your internal state. Strong silence happens when you genuinely don't need a specific outcome anymore. You're not waiting, you're moving forward. Your life has momentum again, and momentum is attractive even from a distance. Another mistake men make is turning silence into coldness. They become distant, guarded, or emotionally shut down, thinking that indifference equals strength. It doesn't. Emotional control isn't emotional withdrawal. Strength is staying grounded without becoming bitter. You don't ignore out of spite. You respond when appropriate without urgency or emotional pressure. That balance signals confidence. It says, I value connection, but I don't need it to feel complete. Women don't chase men who disappear emotionally. They become intrigued by men who remain centered regardless of circumstances. When your silence is backed by purpose, discipline, and self direction, it carries weight. It tells her you have options. Not necessarily other women, but other priorities. Your happiness isn't hanging on a single interaction. That independence is felt even without words. And here's the paradox: the less you use silence to get a result, the more effective it becomes. When you stop trying to engineer attraction and instead embody it, the dynamic naturally recalibrates. She senses that you're no longer trying to secure her attention. You're simply living your life. That shift removes pressure and reintroduces polarity. So don't be silent because you're scared to speak. Be silent because you know your value doesn't need to be announced. Most men think holding on emotionally is what keeps a connection alive. They believe that as long as they care, as long as they stay invested, as long as they don't give up, something will eventually turn around. But emotional attachment doesn't create attraction, it creates pressure. The moment you become attached to a specific outcome, your behavior changes. Your tone shifts, your patience shrinks, your energy becomes heavy, and women feel that instantly. This is why the moment you emotionally detach is often the moment curiosity begins. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop needing. There's a huge difference. Needing someone to respond, to choose you, to reassure you, or to validate your worth puts you in a weaker position. It silently communicates that your sense of stability depends on them. Detachment, on the other hand, comes from self trust. It's the understanding that you'll be fine whether she comes back or not. That internal certainty relaxes your nervous system, and when you're relaxed, you're attractive. As long as you're emotionally attached, she feels safe. Not safe in a good way, safe in a predictable way. She knows where you are. She knows how you feel. She knows she can pull away and still find you waiting. That certainty removes tension, and without tension, attraction fades. Curiosity doesn't exist where everything is known. It exists in uncertainty, in contrast, in emotional space. The instant you let go internally, the dynamic shifts. You stop checking your phone. You stop replaying conversations. You stop interpreting every silence as a signal. Your attention returns to your life, your work, your goals, your body, your mission, and that change is felt even if nothing is said. Emotional detachment changes your presence. Your responses become slower, calmer, more natural. You're no longer trying to say the perfect thing. You're just being yourself again. This is often when she starts to feel something unfamiliar. Not fear, but a subtle sense of loss, not because you disappeared, but because the emotional leverage she had is gone. She no longer feels like the center of your emotional world, and that triggers curiosity. She starts wondering what changed, why you're different, why you're no longer reacting the same way. Attraction begins where validation ends. Men often sabotage this moment by reattaching too quickly. The second she shows interest, they emotionally lean forward again, trying to secure the connection. They chase the feeling instead of staying grounded. But real attraction grows when you remain emotionally centered, not when you grasp. Detachment doesn't mean you reject her, it means you don't abandon yourself to keep her. Another important truth is that emotional detachment removes resentment. When you stop expecting something from her, you stop feeling disappointed, you stop keeping score, you stop needing closure. That emotional neutrality is powerful. It's calm, it's steady, and calm confidence is deeply attractive. It signals emotional maturity, something most people never develop. This is why curiosity shows up after you let go, not while you're holding on. She senses that she may actually lose access to you, not because you threatened it, but because you no longer need it. And paradoxically, that's when she wants to reconnect. Attraction isn't about control, it's about freedom. So if you think detaching means giving up, you're missing the point. Detaching is choosing yourself without bitterness, without drama, and without fear. And that's when the dynamic finally begins to work in your favor. Most men believe that if a woman hasn't reached out, it means she doesn't care anymore. They assume indifference looks loud, a clear rejection, a direct statement, a dramatic exit. But real indifference is quiet. When someone is truly done, they don't need to announce it. They don't need to send signals. They don't need to prove anything. That's why one of the clearest signs a woman hasn't forgotten you is when she subtly shows that she wants to be seen not forgetting you. If she were genuinely indifferent, there would be nothing. No curiosity, no indirect contact, no check in. No emotional static, just silence and absence with no trace. But when she hasn't fully let go, her behavior becomes inconsistent. She may not reach out directly, but she keeps the thread alive, watching your stories, liking an old post, asking mutual friends how you're doing, suddenly reacting to something trivial. These are not random actions. They are low risk ways of maintaining emotional proximity without exposing herself to rejection. Women rarely reach out directly when their feelings are uncertain. Instead, they test, they probe the environment, they look for signals that it's safe to re engage. These behaviors allow her to feel connected without committing emotionally. And the key point most men miss is this: she wouldn't do any of it if she truly didn't care. Indifference doesn't check in, indifference doesn't hover, indifference moves on completely. Men often misinterpret these signals and sabotage themselves. The moment they notice her attention, they rush in emotionally. They confront, they ask for clarity, they overinvest. In doing so, they destroy the very mystery that created her curiosity in the first place. The attention she was giving wasn't an invitation to chase, it was an invitation to remain centered. Another mistake is assuming these behaviors mean she's ready to fully return. They don't. They mean she's emotionally unresolved. She's remembered how she felt, not deciding what she wants yet. That's why patience matters. When you respond with calm confidence instead of urgency, you allow her emotional process to continue unfolding naturally. Attraction doesn't grow when it's forced. It grows when it feels safe and free. It's also important to understand that people don't test doors they've emotionally closed. If she checks to see whether you're still open, still stable, still grounded, it's because part of her hasn't moved on. She wants to know if access still exists without risking her pride or vulnerability. That's not manipulation, it's human nature. The power position here isn't to read into every signal or analyze every action. It's to stay steady. You don't reward uncertainty with over availability. You don't punish it with coldness. You remain open but unneedy. That balance keeps the dynamic alive without sacrificing your self respect. And here's the deeper truth: when you're no longer waiting for proof that she remembers you, you stop needing to interpret her behavior at all. You don't chase signs, you don't look for validation. You let her actions speak over time. If she wants to reconnect, she will find a way to make it clearer. If she doesn't, you haven't lost anything because your life didn't pause while you waited. So if she's still finding ways to stay connected without stepping forward, understand what that really means. If she had truly forgotten you, she wouldn't need to prove otherwise. Most men expect reconnection to happen on their timeline. They think if a woman is going to reach out, it will be soon and it will be obvious. When that doesn't happen, they assume the door is closed, but attraction doesn't operate on urgency, it operates on emotional readiness. That's why the real surprise isn't that she remembers you, it's when and why she reaches out. And almost every time, coach, it happens when you've stopped waiting for it. Women rarely reconnect when you're still emotionally available on standby. As long as you're watching, hoping, or subtly positioning yourself for her return, the emotional tension is gone. She senses there's no urgency to act because access is still there. But when your attention genuinely shifts back to your life, your purpose, your routine, your growth, something changes. You're no longer energetically present in the same way. And that absence isn't empty, it's full of momentum. Momentum creates attraction. This is why reconnection often happens when you least expect it. Not because you stop caring, but because you stopped needing, you stopped monitoring her behavior. You stopped interpreting silence. You stopped living in anticipation. And that internal shift changes how you show up everywhere else. Your confidence becomes quieter. Your energy becomes steadier. You're no longer trying to be remembered. You're just being yourself again. And that version of you is the one she was drawn to in the first place. Another mistake men make is assuming that if she reaches out, it means everything is resolved. It doesn't. Reaching out is usually curiosity, not commitment. It's an emotional check in, a moment of reflection, a response to contrast. She's feeling the difference between having you and not having you, and she wants to see who you are now. If you respond with excitement, explanations, or emotional intensity, you collapse the tension immediately. But if you respond calmly, playfully, and without expectation, you allow the attraction to rebuild naturally. The timing of her message often aligns with moments when you appear fulfilled, when your life looks full, when you're no longer broadcasting emotional availability, not because she's monitoring you constantly, but because emotional signals are picked up intuitively. People feel when someone has moved on. And paradoxically, that's when they feel pulled back in. Here's the part most men don't want to hear. The outcome doesn't actually matter anymore at that point. When you've truly moved forward, her reaching out becomes optional, not essential. You're open to reconnecting, but you're not invested in reclaiming the past. You're evaluating, not chasing. And that reversal of roles is what creates real attraction. Confidence isn't about indifference, it's about choice, whether she comes back or not. You win when your life no longer revolves around the possibility. If she reaches out and things align, great. If she doesn't, you've already built something better in the meantime. That's the mindset shift most men miss. The goal was never to make her miss you. The goal was to reclaim your direction, your self respect, and your emotional independence. And when you do that, attraction either returns naturally or becomes irrelevant. And either way, you're exactly where you need to be.